So welcome everybody to World After Sport, another week of sporting transitions discussions. It's great to have a number of great guys on the call again. I'm going to go around the room and introduce, and then we're going to talk about transferable skills today, how we can transfer what we learnt in sport, what we've learnt in life, and take that to the next level, take that to the next opportunity. So without further ado, my name's Martin Underwood, former banking consultant, worked on the Money Project, and worked in the banking industry for over 25 years. Moved on to World After Sport following a number of conversations with athletes about their future lives, and just felt this was an opportunity. So lovely to have everyone else on the call. Let me pass around in no particular order. Perhaps we'll start with someone who's been on before. So let's start with Charlie today, if I may.
Morning, gents. Charlie Beckett, current professional player, contract with Jersey Reds. Just here to start learning what I can be doing to prepare for when I do finish.
Fantastic, Charlie. Serge?
Hi, I'm Serge Betsen, French international, retired 10 years ago nearly, and really pleased to be part of this World After Sport committee. Then pleased to share my experience, also willing to learn a lot in terms of organization, structuration, and opportunities to get to my another life.
Thank you, Serge. Hoggy?
Yeah, Carl Hogg, morning. Was ex-professional rugby player, coached at Gloucester, Worcester, and now currently coaching at the Ospreys. Interested in running parallel education alongside professional athletes.
Thanks. Oh, Alan?
Yeah, morning everybody. Alan Davis, 20 years of being a personal development practitioner in sport. Currently working at a university, looking after student athlete scholars.
Fantastic. And Louie?
Morning, chaps. Thank you for having me on board. Average professional rugby player many years ago, transitioned into coaching about 10, 12 years ago. Started off in the Scarlets region in the academies, went to some sort of tier 2 senior head coach roles with Kamal and Quins, Pontypool. Then took me across to the Middle East, a little adventure over there for 3 years, coaching in Bahrain in the West Asia Premiership with the director of rugby over there. Did some tier 2 international stuff as well, and then took a job, an academy job with Exeter Chiefs, which I'm currently in.
Brilliant, Louis. It's lovely to have you here as well. So thank you ever so much for joining us. So as I mentioned at the start, we're going to talk about transferable skills. So I'm going to share my screen with you all first. I've got a little challenge for you, which I'll come to in a moment, which is a reason for asking earlier if you've got your pens and paper. Hopefully you can all see the screen. If you can't, do shout now because it's up there. So transferable skills. Do I have any? What are they? Something that we all think about, but actually a lot of the things that an athlete and a coach do on a day-to-day basis are actually incredibly transferable. Maybe the subject matter changes, but the ability to do the actual skill, the ability to execute is there. And the whole reason for today is really to reassure both coaches and athletes and players that absolutely have you got the skills that are needed by businesses, by corporates, by everybody and anybody. And they are things that we can think about going forward. So what I've done is I've put together a load of words on the screen. And what I'd like you to do, you've got 30 seconds to scribble down the words that you think are important or the words you think are transferable to you. There is a stop clock, and I will stop the clock and the screen will go, all the words will go off the screen, but it's only a bit of, call it fun to capture the ones that you think are important. And then we'll have a conversation about those words because, again, it's about reassuring you guys that there's a lot there. So I'm going to move to that now. Be ready. It's going to start straight away. And like I say, we'll do 30 seconds. Then we'll have a conversation about the transferable skills that we think are there. And if there are any missing that you think, actually, what about this one? Of course, fire them up as well. You ready?
Yeah.
Let's do this. Well, I hope you wrote them all down, guys. I'm expecting you to got at least 75% of them. Not. So if you want to all come off mute, if you can, that would be great. I'm happy if someone wants to share what they think. I'm going to put them all on the screen now anyway. So who would like to go first and tell me the words that they picked out?
Yeah, I'll start if you want to.
Yeah, go for it, Alan.
The ones that hit me straight away were negotiating, organised, interpersonal, communicator, and trust.
Fabulous.
And I run out of time.
It's not a lot of time, 30 seconds, is it? So I would suggest that, Hoggy, you'll have some different ones to that.
Yeah, mine was around leadership or leader. You had team player, motivates others, and manager.
Fabulous. Louis, I'm guessing you had a couple of different ones.
Similar, actually, talking about leadership ones generally. So motivate to others, managing expectation, interpersonal relationship management, and managing conflict is an interesting one as well.
Absolutely. Charlie?
I had a lot of overlap, but the other two I had, no one's mentioned yet, are the results driven and the willing to learn. They sprung out to me pretty early.
Fabulous. And Serge?
I think, yeah, I'll join to Charlie. Willing to learn is one of them. Relationship management and communicator. The three are really noticed.
Yeah. And what you'll find is that we look at the words that mean something to us right now. So we tend to forget the ones that we've got in the locker. So it was interesting that Hoggy and Louis picked out things about leadership, because they're in a leadership role at the moment in terms of where they are in coaching. So about leader, manager, motivate others, conflict, it really sticks with where am I in my life? And that's what athletes, coaches find, that when they are looking at their next opportunity, they often find, and we all often find, oh, I've got to think of some other things that I'm not used to right now. But actually, if I think back, I have got that skill. And what we'll do is we're going to go through this slide bit by bit. So it's exactly the same thing 5 times, but we're going to go through it and pick a word. So if I go to the next screen, you will see that it's not changed other than some red words. So please, again, join in the conversation here. But for me, again, someone said inspirational. Someone said results driven. Someone said motivate others, team player, communicator. Why? Because in sport, they're massively important. Sport is a results-driven business. You guys all know that. I can't really tell you any more about that. But part of that is the reason we get results-driven, and we are motivated to achieve. As a team, we're motivated to win for each other as well as for ourselves. That makes us the team player we are. And we can't succeed in any job we do without communication. Does anyone disagree with that? Has anyone got any thoughts on that? Because again, it's not about Martin talking, it's about opening the door to everybody. But I when I did this on my own, I sort of picked those 4 out or 5 out as probably really important starting points for a player, I would suggest, more than a coach, although the coach obviously is determined by results. So any thoughts?
I think just about my experience, I think, yeah, communication is something very important in the day-to-day, and it's true that in rugby world, people who tend to communicate or people who tend to speak a lot are people who are very comfortable with themselves and very confident. And I found it really interesting throughout my career, where I tend, because I know I'm a little bit shy, and I know I'm a little bit non-confident, I tend to identify people I really wanted to be with, and people who give me that confidence. And I think communication is one of the things where if you're shy and very not confident, you're not going to be getting to have that. And I always feel like in rugby, there is different type of people who are and different abilities, and that communication skills is something you learn year after year. And I have to say, rugby is one of the sports who give you the opportunity to be more communicator or not. But it's true that within the pitch or outside the pitch is completely different. And the fact that you're very shy outside the pitch, on the pitch you can be willing to communicate, willing to share things, then that's for me the beauty of what rugby teach me.
Absolutely. And communication to me in business is the most important aspect of success. So when I talk to other businesses about my experiences, they're exactly the same as yours, Serge, which is that it's the be all and end all. If I don't, as the leader, communicate to my team and to my executives correctly, clearly, concisely, whether it's verbal, whether it's written, presentational, or any other method, then I'm not going to get my message across, and people are going to have a misunderstanding. And I would assume it's the same in sport, because if you say, right, every move we're going to do, we're going to go down the left-hand side, but don't make that clear, so we start to go down the right-hand side, then there's been a miscommunication, a misunderstanding. Therefore, communication becomes the important thing. And I think athletes in particular are incredibly strong verbally with their communication, because they have to be able to communicate above noise. They have to be able to communicate in a scuffle in rugby. They have to be able to communicate to people across a long distance. Whereas obviously in a business, it can be in a small, quiet room. It can be within, let's say, 2 meters of each other now. But it's very much easier to communicate verbally in a business and corporate environment, more so, I would suggest, than sport. But to have the ability to have that communication skill is essential. What I do find sometimes with athletes is that written skills are less strong sometimes. So what I find is the level of, or the amount of communication is less. Keep it very concise, probably even 2 or 3 words when it's perhaps not enough. And I think that's an area for certain development, because again, I'm not asking people to write to me to say world, war and peace, but what sometimes I find is, oh, yeah, I don't now understand what you're after because you've given me just a few words. And maybe that's because that's the world that an athlete and coaches live in, and sports people live in, is get on with it, to the point. But again, communication to me is the most important. That drift, and if you think about communication, it feeds into all the other things. So communication leads to the motivation of others. It leads you to being a team player. And it was really interesting what you just said, Serge, about off the pitch you might be shy, but on the pitch you can be more expressive and more vocal, and let's say a louder person, whether that's verbally or not. There's a bigger standing point for you. For me, that's really interesting, because again, what World After Sport and what I would want to do with you is bring out some of that on-pitch skill to give you the confidence to do it off the pitch, because it's important to me, vitally important, that you can do that. Has anyone else got any thoughts on any of those words or any of the things we've just said?
Yeah, Mark.
Sorry, Alan.
Sorry, Mark. Yeah, I think we mentioned it a little bit last week. I think in my roles over the years, obviously at one stage I was seeing a lot of CVs, and probably every CV has on there good communicator. But then when you meet the individual and you ask them for competence and evidence based, they go very quiet. And it was interesting for me, probably about 5-6 years ago, when I did the coach mentoring sort of program, or the sort of ILM mentoring program. They used the word effective communication, because the one thing in that skill you forget about is listening skills.
Yep.
And I think, looking at some of the coaches here now, I'm sure that you've all had the same, you get the message across in your coaching and whatever, and then the players will walk out the door and half of them will go, what did he say? And because they haven't been listening, and I think it's important, isn't it? When you talk communication, absolutely, dovetails into every other single, sort of transferable skill anyway. But it's that effective communication, being effective listening as well.
Definitely. Charlie, you were going to say something at the same time. Go for it.
Yeah, I was going to say, you'll have obviously far more experience than any of us in the corporate and business world, Martin, but in rugby especially, we can be rather, the way we communicate, because we're results driven, can be rather abrasive and straight talking. Sometimes the language used, you probably get fired for using in the corporate world. To be honest, the things I've been called and called people, I'm sure we've all had experience of that in this call. Do you think it's a skill that needs to be learned moving into different industries, how to communicate? Because I know, for example, if I'm sat with 4 of the lads I play with, I'll talk in one way. If I'm then sat with my mother and grandmother, I'll have to pick up a different part of my brain to talk. I can't use the same words, same vocabulary, that sort of stuff. So do you think that's something that, well, I think it's definitely something that needs to be addressed, in the fact that you can't speak in a corporate or business world the way you do in rugby, but do you think that's something people realise? Because I know I've had a few instances, especially we spoke last time about doing the box walk, you're doing the corporate stuff off. I've had to catch myself from saying something because people are talking to me about rugby, because that's the icebreaker a lot of the time. I almost start using words I absolutely shouldn't. So I just think that can be an issue for sports people, especially rugby players and coaches and people who are used to the rugby world moving into a non-rugby world, that our vocabulary isn't really acceptable in what I call the real world, I don't think.
I think that's fair across all sports, Louis, to be fair, because it's a passionate world that you're in on a day-to-day basis. We do sometimes in corporate world use words we probably shouldn't as well, to reassure you. But what you've actually said to me there, which I pick out straight away, is you have the ability to transfer it, because you said you speak to your mum and your grandma differently. And what we've got to do as athletes, and absolutely there's a bit of development work to be done, but is to learn to adjust to your levels of to who you're speaking to. So even in rugby, you might speak to a young junior amateur differently to the way you speak to one of the first team, and differently to the way you speak to your coach, and differently to the way you speak to the MD. And as an athlete, you can facilitate in your mind how to do that sometimes. The difference will be, and I think Sean Long hit this nail on the head last week or week before, was sometimes certainly doing the box walk, that's really tough, because again, then you've got potentially 5 or 6 different styles within the box walk to do as well. And you're talking to people you don't know. So you don't know whether they would accept some language or not. Some of them will, some of them won't. Some will be shocked if you use certain words. Some of them won't care if you use certain words. But it's about the early conversation and sussing out where they pitch themselves, if you like, in terms of what they're like as a person. So if I gave you an example of me, is at the Hong Kong Sevens a couple of years ago, I was sat with my mates in the stands, knowing that I was going to go and meet Peter Wheeler and a couple of other senior people in World Rugby. So I said, one, I'm not going to drink because I don't want to be leery in any way or whatever. I've got to remember where I am and who I am. But then obviously you talk with your mates as you're doing, like you say, you use certain language, you behave in a certain way. But then as soon as I got to that corporate box to meet Peter, it was straight on with a corporate image. And it was like, right, I've got to behave in a certain way. I've got, now ironically, the first thing I was asked was, what do you want to drink? I offered an orange juice. I was told that it's a rugby tour. It wasn't quite the words of it's a rugby tour. There was a couple of words in there, but that calmed me down, but brought us back on the same level. And again, what we find with communication is that's the key, is to, one, Alan hit the nail on the head. Listen, how are people talking? What are they saying? And how are they saying it? And then obviously it's about adapting yourself. And maybe that's one that we should have on here, is adaptiveness, is adapting to the situation in the place around you.
I agree with that massively. I think going back to what Alan said as well, I think the big skill for me is being self-aware. So being self-aware and being socially aware. And I think it's up to us as coaches to create an environment where players do feel psychologically safe to express themselves. And the beauty of rugby is that you are dealing with lots of different characters and lots of different personalities, and that does give you a unique sort of experience set, really, when you take that into business later on. But I think being self-aware and socially aware, very, very important.
Totally agree with you, Louis. Absolutely. I'm just going to go through these words quickly, but please dive in if you've got anything to say. So inspirational, the fans around the pitch, the people who watch the sport, it doesn't have to be rugby, it could be any sport where the people are watching and participating. Right now, of course, it's weird because we've not got that surrounding, but those people are inspired by what happens on the pitch. They are also inspired by meeting the player after the game. They are also inspired enough to go and buy a shirt with names on it. So as athletes, you have this ability to inspire people, not just with what you do on the pitch. I hear a lot of times when I meet players, and I've been to Exeter 3 times, I think, and I've loved every single time I go because there's a feel about the place. And same with other, I've been to Worcester. I think I've only ever not been to probably about 2 of the Premiership grounds, but there's always a feel of welcomeness and inclusionist. And that's what inspires me to want to be involved in rugby and take my kids and the wife and all the rest of it. It's a family affair. But players are inspirational, as well as being inspired by the people they work with. Results driven is obvious. You know, sport is a results driven business, and business is a results driven business. You know, World After Sport has got to deliver results, otherwise it cannot provide to the players and to the coaches. You know, a bank has to deliver its results year on year, otherwise its share price is impacted. It doesn't matter what the world is or what the business is. It's still a result of some type that is being driven out. We don't do anything in life really without having a result. Even family is results driven. You want kids, you don't want kids. You know, you want to succeed, you want to live in a certain house, you want to have a certain car. They're all results that we have. So that is results driven is just a capability and a transferable skill that you can move. But like communication, you adjust it to whatever you're working within. Motivate others, again, second nature to athletes and to coaches. It's what we have to do on a day-to-day basis. Team player as well, we've talked about. So let me move to the next screen. So again, I've picked out some slightly different words this time. Again, same, the others are still there. Self-motivated. I find this one interesting because we've just said you're a team player. But you have to motivate yourself as well. You have to get up in the morning and train. You have to behave in a certain way. You can't go out on the lash every Friday. Like I can't anymore, I'm too old. But that's not, you know, there are certain things you can give and take in life. And an athlete takes certain passions of saying, I've got to do this because I want to be one of the best. I want to be in the first team. I want to be here. Yeah. And we've talked in the past about the stellar player, the middle player, and the ones who find it hard. All of those people have still got self-motivational skills. All of those have still got the need to motivate themselves to be the person they are, in the position they are, the status they are. Confidence.
So, Martin,
yeah.
I think what's important as well is, you know, we all recognize the transferable skills and the words, you know, in our worlds. And I think I said it last week, and maybe Carl can help out here as well. It's getting the players, or even other coaches as well, and individuals that, you know, we deal with, is to recognize what that skill is. You know, we use the words quite regularly, don't know, good communicator, yeah, I'm willing to learn, but what does it actually mean to that individual? And that, I think I said it a couple of weeks ago, is that one of the most difficult tasks with me whenever I dealt with young players and senior players going into transition is like, they don't recognize these skills, but they see the words and they go, oh yeah, I'm a team player, I'm organized, you know, I problem solve, but they can't use examples where they've used those skills. And I think I used the example a couple of weeks ago again. It's like, you know, when a player was retiring, had all these skills, but he couldn't see where they transferred until you placed him into a business, an organization, just to explore and just to observe. And it was after 3 or 4, you know, sort of, you know, visits, he was going, oh gosh, this manufacturing company is exactly like a rugby team. You know, they have a team leader, they have a foreman, they have tasks, they need to problem solve. So I think that's the key thing, you know, in any type of learning for individuals, is to again, it's going back to evidence and examples in their lives of when have you negotiated. And just on the final one there, that's why I put negotiating. That's the biggest one I've done over the last 20 years, you know, with all the rugby players and coaches. And it's like, and Louie will understand this as well. It's like, right, somebody's got a clash of an exam with a Six Nations. Now, in the past, people just used to sit back and go, all right, I'll ignore my exam. I'll just go and play in that Six Nations because that's their bubble. That's their passion. Whereas now, it's learning that negotiating to go to the right people and negotiate. Can I do it early? Can I do it later? You know, that's why people like Jamie Roberts did his A-levels out in Argentina, because his coaches were telling him it's either or. You either go to Argentina on an under-20s World Cup or you sit your exams. And once he did it out in Argentina, that sort of got the ball rolling for others. So it is about understanding what those words mean, you know, and, you know, you guys have got far more experience in coaching and, you know, and as a player, but that's the key thing for me, is for the players to, or the individual to understand, you know, what those skills are for them, because half of these words will go into a CV.
I would hope they all do, to be fair, Alan, and I think you're absolutely right, and you're dead right as well. Is the thing that we would want to work with on with World After Sport, with athletes and coaches, is using these words, and as you rightly say, is how do we put them into real life? So yeah, absolutely, and negotiation is an interesting one, because you have to negotiate contracts. You know, I would suggest that players and coaches often say to their agent, go and get me the best contract. But how much of that contract do you know? How much of it is part of your negotiation? Or are you leaving it all to the agent? And if you're leaving it to the agent, are you setting yourself up for they're going to take more of it than they should, etc. So negotiation is a key. Obviously, on the pitch, you negotiate situations. But in business life, in personal life, negotiation is happening, again, almost every day. And what we want to do is work to identify those examples with athletes and coaches so that they can feel confident to walk into an interview or into a conversation knowing, do you know what, negotiation isn't saying, well, I'll give you 50p to the pound instead of 60p to the pound. It could be a conversation. Negotiation could be softer than anything else in the world. It doesn't have to be aggressive. So again, it's about working with individuals to see how we can best place it. Confidence is surge. Oh, yeah.
Martin, just on that subject, picking up your point, Alan, I think when you look at, say, leadership, communication, man management, that's something in a rugby domain I'm pretty sure most players and coaches would be pretty comfortable with. We've all stood in dressing rooms, we've all held people to account, we've hopefully inspired, motivated. So I think we understand the words, but the ability to put that into a corporate environment or a business environment, having that confidence or creating that experience is the key transition. I think, well, certainly for myself, I understand the skills I've got, and I'm very confident in a rugby domain because I've got an opinion, because I've got experience of the game. But if that went in a corporate world, I'm not sure what that would look like. And I think that's the unknown that players would be concerned about. I'm pretty sure that players would be confident in their ability to communicate, inspire, but what that actually looks like and building that experience in a different domain, I think, is critical.
And I think, Carl, you're absolutely right. I think we all agree in this. This is where you know, clubs can really, you know, take advantage here with all their sponsors, isn't it? Now, forget about the box walks and boys just go around. If they linked to a specific employer, you know, not to look for the job, but to learn those experiences, isn't it? And learn those sort of, you know, how do you negotiate in this environment? How do you, you know, sell things? You know, what is your brand? And I think this is where we've all agreed, but it's like, you know, I'm not a company. I know some clubs do it, and you know, and some clubs do it very well because they link some of the players up with a sponsor or commercial partner, and they build that sort of, you know, relationship, which is half the battle. But but also it's like for those players to go in and experience that. And no, I want them to come out and go, oh my gosh, that was brilliant, but I could never work in that environment because X, Y, and Z was brilliant. Because then, then you're eliminating some things rather than, finding. But at the same time, they could end up in an environment. I remember speaking to one guy, and he had an engineering degree, yeah, and he'd never been into an engineering company, never. And he's now doing strength and conditioning, believe it or not. But it was like all of a sudden, years later, he got talking to somebody and he went, oh my gosh, he didn't realize the different types of departments or the different sort of roles in a big manufacturing company. So yeah, I agree with, I think you said it before, Carl, it's like, to me, it's not an easy fix, but it's a hell of a way of going when you link a player, and not just for one visit, you link them for, like, go there every day off for the next 6 weeks for each department to learn certain skills. And I'm sure employers would help as well. They'd want, and it goes back to what Charlie said about, and what Serge said about willing to learn. If they want to learn a new skill, but using their rugby background into that environment, that all of a sudden the penny will drop with them.
Definitely. Just going back to negotiation quickly, I guess the thing for me, Carl, is that on a day-to-day basis, we talk, at sporting levels, you're talking to players and encouraging them to do things. Perhaps try a new play, perhaps trying to get them to do a new skill, whatever. It's exactly the same in business. Is if I'm talking to one of my team, I need them to deliver. So therefore, it's, we're looking for this to happen. How long is it going to take you? Why is it going to take you that long? How can you do it quicker? How could you do it better? Do you need any support with it from me or from other people? So that the negotiation style can be similar. And as Charlie was saying earlier, maybe the language might be slightly different at times, but the actual messages are very, very similar. And I think Alan's right, is the more we can share experience and put people into placement, the easier people will see absolutely that, what you do on a day-to-day basis in one environment is exactly the same. The objectives are often the same. Okay, like, again, it goes back to the results driven. We're all there to deliver something and achieve something, whether it's in sport or in business. Therefore, we need other people to help us do that. There's very few things in this world where it takes one person to achieve all of it, the end-to-end deliverable. So we're always negotiating, talking to people. And for me, it's really just the approach to it. So again, my conversation in this call, I guess, is really to say, you've got 90% of it, maybe 80% of it already there in your locker in capability. It's the experience of saying, actually, Jesus, I've just seen that it is the same. It does feel the same. It's just a different topic. And again, my experience personally are when I talk to different banks and different businesses about going into work with them, the desire of what they need is the same. The approach to it, the behaviors I may need to portray or show may slightly differ. And that goes to what Louie was saying about adaptive. And for me, it's a key. Negotiation is important, but I think the self-motivation as well, equally important. You have to motivate yourself to get out of bed and to do these things. As well, you have to be self-motivated to be willing to learn and to see these things for reality. Has anyone else got anything that they want to say on those before I move on a little? Brilliant. Organised is one that I'm intrigued in, if I can ask or challenge you guys to help me a little bit. So organised can be many, many things. It can be self-organised. It can be, again, corporately organised, or whatever. My understanding, my feeling of players and of sport is that obviously a lot of things are told. You're told where to go, what to do, how to do it. Whereas in my profession, it's me that has to be very, very organised with my diary on a day-to-day basis. I have to know what other people are doing on a day-to-day basis. I have to know where my pieces of work are on a day-to-day basis. So I have to be incredibly organised from a plan perspective, from an understanding of status perspective, because I might be flowing perfectly and let's say a project is delivering nicely for me or isn't, and I know where it's at, but then suddenly I get a click of a switch and someone saying, so one of the executives saying, actually, do you know what, I've changed my mind. I don't want it to do it like that. I want to do it like this. And then I have to unravel what's happening and where we are. And I need to be able to say how long that's going to take to tell someone that what they've just said is going to affect us. So it means that I then have to be organized from a reactive perspective as well as a proactive perspective. So organization, obviously, day-to-day, how you deal with things, but also, you know, I would say that's probably an interesting one in sport. I don't know if anyone else has got any thoughts. Anyone got any ideas on that one?
Yeah, I think in sport, Martin, it's very regimented now. And, you know, I look at especially some of the young academy players come out and you follow a program and you follow a succession plan. And I think we talk about making independent decision makers on the field. Yet we actually try and structure everything around that. So I do think there's a conflict there where I say I go back to our generation or my generation where they all came from different walks of life and they were still amateur and you played the game. And I do think you had a lot more individual decision makers and personalities. I am concerned now the game's almost honing everybody into a regimented fashion.
So
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah,
that is a concern for me. We're having lots of discussions at the moment of how we're spoon feeding players, not just on tech stuff, but on how to live their lives and how to plan their weeks, and they should be doing this, then, and so forth. So something we're trying to do at the moment is really trying to get them to take control of their schedules and their IDPs as well as a big one. I mean, some of these student athletes now, they'll be exposed to more stress regarding their schedules than I've ever been. You know, managing a full-time degree and trying to get back to training at certain days and certain times, it's very stressful for them. So they're doing a decent job, but it's just the balance is key. Trying to get them to drive their own scheduling and make their own smart decisions is critical. You know, and I think as coaches, we've got to create an environment where it's safe for them to do that and potentially make a few mistakes along the way and give them relevant feedback when required.
I think on that point, I think that's such a big point. Like, I came through Leicester Academy, which was almost military style and it's regimented, how regimented it was. And I think if I hadn't then went to Gloucester, which was obviously Premiership club, incredibly professional, you were pretty much told where you need to be, what you need to be doing for your whole day. I think if I hadn't been at Jersey, where maybe Championship is they just haven't got as much staff, as much time, as much resources, I think I would have struggled massively more in this last 8 weeks where I haven't had my days planned out, where I've had to sort my own time, my own training, all that. I think without the experience of having to do that a little bit more, being at a Championship club, I think I would have really struggled, because since the age of 16, I've been told for the next 6 years by my rugby club where to be, what to eat, what time to do it at, and when to go to bed. And like, that was the only thing I had to plan was my own A-level student. That was only because I wanted to do that I did it. Like, to be honest, the clubs they say all the right things. Sometimes certain clubs maybe don't put as much emphasis on their academy boys' education. Sometimes they maybe would like the world to think they do. So it was only because I had pressure, thankfully, from parents that I had to get that done, that I had that organisational skill. But some boys I know who did 3 years at Leicester, were cut loose for whatever reason happens, went into university and struggled so much with planning their own days because they didn't have academy managers saying, right, at 9 o'clock you do this, you'll be done by 10:30, but at 11 o'clock you need to be there. And I think it's something that maybe people think as athletes we are organised because we have to eat the right thing and be on time, but that's all we have to do. It's all laid out for us. We just have to do as we're told. And when you haven't got someone telling you, it's quite strange. You can be quite lost.
I think what I've heard from players at the end of their careers, probably more in football than in rugby, but certainly in sport generally, is that's one of the biggest things is suddenly it's up to you when you get up. It's up to you what you do during the day. It's up to you how you motivate yourself to do something, to get on with the next step. and that is one of the biggest challenges. And again, one of the things I would want to be part of the reason for World After Sport, I guess, is because we want to help that transition. We're not going to make the decisions. The player becomes accountable for the decisions made, and the coaches obviously as well. As the person who we're talking to makes the decisions, but we just encourage. We're working with. Louie, you mentioned development plans. You know, we want to have a development plan. We want that development plan to obviously align to whatever they've got with the club, so we're not conflicting. And what we want to do is we want them to feel confident that the day that they walk out of sport, that they know how to approach the next step. And obviously they've already, the idea is that they've already started to approach it before the end of their career, so that we are transitioning seamlessly, and not having what I would call a dip in feelings, a dip in income, a dip in positivity, that hopefully you move from one to the other in a relatively seamless, I won't say totally seamless, but relatively seamless way.
Well, and I just pick up on your point. I think that's the vital thing, isn't it? Where we get that experience of a different lifestyle when you're still in professional sport, because professional sport does cocoon players in a certain way of life. And I could imagine exactly the same in the military. And when people come out the military, out of professional sport, the world is different. The world's alien to what we know. You know, and if we can expose players to that experience through a number of years, you know, both from a job prospects, but also too from mental health. You know, you talk a lot about players struggling to adjust to normal life after sport, because of the different way of life.
I think you mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, and in one of the early things, it's like the more I listen is something, you know, to you guys, and it's what I was not banging my head sort of like even 15 years ago. It's like you have this contract of employment being a rugby player or even a coach, but part of it has to be for your own personal development. And, you know, sort of like, you know, are we getting to that stage where I think a lot of players are realizing as well? It's like, yeah, I've got a lot of downtime as well. So part of your employment contract is, like, for 7 of those hours, you actually go and work with a, you know, I think one I'm not sure if New Zealand did it at one stage with their sort of collective bargaining with their central contracts, is that every player, so let's just use a figure. So if a player's on £100,000, but actually a fifth of that is for your personal development. So you go and work with somebody, or you use it for doing a degree, etc. So part of your income is being paid for that. If you decide, or if that player decided, no, I don't want to do that, okay, then your salary now is 80 grand. You know, and I know that it happened with some of the New Zealand guys. I remember when, you know, some of the New Zealanders came over to the Ospreys years ago. They could not believe, you know, you had people like Marty Holler, who was part, you know, a big engineer, electrician, you know, sort of in a big family company. But when he came over to the UK, he was still wanting to go and speak to electricians and engineers in Wales. And that was being self-organized. But that's because that's what he was used to. You know, it was part of his personal rugby development. And I think Carl said it a couple of weeks ago, it's like, you know, it's got to be integrated in it within that sort of training week, you know, and it can be flexible as well, because some training weeks do differ. But it's like, right, look, for half a day in that week, you go to that employer. And it may be that the coaches say, look, we want you to develop your communication skills, but you're going to develop it with this employer, you know, or, you know, your problem solving skills, or whatever the skill is that, you know, the feedback that the players get can then go into transferable into industry.
Exactly, Alan, and it also builds their confidence to see, of course, that the skill is there for both. I've just flicked the screen to the next slide because I'm conscious of time, but I'm going to fly through these quickly, but please dive in. So I think, Louie, you called out relationship management earlier on. I've called out here though some of the other things that are probably things that athletes do on a day-to-day basis, but again, they're just words in certain ways. So hospitality. Sport is driven by hospitality, and you guys, as you've said, box walks is one of those things where you guys experience, sometimes painfully, sometimes pleasurably, of course, is hospitality, and know how it affects and how it can generate interest, generate income, and so you have a potential. There's a lot of athletes go into hospitality at the end of their careers. Certainly, obviously, some of the higher stellar players, if you like, have that opportunity because of their status. But hospitality for me is a good one to show, a bit like brand awareness, that you guys are businesses in yourselves. And the business of you, which is the mantra of World After Sport, is all about helping players and coaches understand that they're a brand. So, let's use Charlie as a good example, is a great brand at Jersey, with working really hard on communication stuff. So doing a lot of Instagram lives, doing other conversations, getting involved with us, of course, and building a brand of Charlie Beckett. And players are doing that and having to do that on a day-to-day basis so that they get noticed. Of course, what they do on the pitch is vital to that brand awareness. But the box walks is also part of that. That leads into the marketing of, so we've used obviously Twitter. And one of the things that we've talked about on these calls before, one of the things I am very keen to support athletes with is helping them to market themselves from a future planning perspective as well. So it's about, for me, give you an example again, is if I said to a player, right, okay, you're an up and coming young lad, you're starting to make noise, let's get you a website built now. It doesn't say a great deal. It just says there's some examples of me, so you can market yourself to clubs. But it just tells you also, what are my interests? What are my business interests? What's my qualifications? Because that will start to feed into and talk to corporates and to businesses who go, oh God, he's interested in engineering, as we've talked about a couple of times today. He's got a qualification in engineering. I wouldn't mind sponsoring him, because then that starts to feed into this work experience opportunity, etc., etc. And the player starts to understand how that little aspect of marketing, if you want to call it that, was a foundation point. But it means that website can grow and develop and change. So by the time they've got to the end of their career, it says all of their history. So they've got a CV on their website, but also it shows all the future employers, all the things that they've got involved with. So work experience at A, work experience at B, work experience at C. It starts to build that power and that profile that really hits home. And it's not strong marketing as we would know it, but it helps. And it also helps, LinkedIn, I find really powerful for just remembering who I've worked with on what. And my LinkedIn, I don't know, 800 people. And the reason for that is because I've been to so many different companies to work. But if I was sat today going, oh God, I've got no LinkedIn, I've got to think of those 800 people. If I remembered 100, great. And so LinkedIn is another powerful marketing tool to say, this is what I'm doing and this is where I'm at. This is what I achieved when I was with that place. So if it was, if you're a coach, then you might say I've coached at these 3 clubs. I played at these 4 clubs. But not just I've done that, but what did you achieve when you were there? You don't just go in and coach. You don't just go in and play. You do something more than that. And again, this is where the transferable skills will start to come to life a little bit. And where your CV comes to life is that part of my experience and my skill set is to bring those skills out and help you understand that you've got a lot of those abilities. We just, it's conversation. It's one-to-one talking and coaching with people like myself to say, look, you can do this. You've just given me a really strong example of leadership or of confidence or of verbal communication or written communication, and you can transfer, and so it shows you've got the ability. Now it's about taking it to the next level.
Martin, can I just ask, I know Charlie's the I know we're a small group here, but talking to Carl, Serge and Louie, when we look at all these skills, and I know every individual is different, are there common skills that players currently lack from that list? So like I said earlier on, is like if you said right, this player, he's not communicating well on the pitch, and we're doing everything we can. So taking him away and putting him into a different organization or a different environment to learn. But are there common skills that players lack at the moment?
Tough one.
Yeah.
um,
Because I think for me, I shouldn't jump in. I was hoping that Carl, Serge, and Louie would answer then, but it is this personal organization doing things for themselves. Yeah, we refer to self-managing. How much are they self-managing? Because that's what I'm experiencing a lot of at the moment, is that they live by the training schedule. I asked a player a couple of weeks ago, I said, right, what's your highlight of today? And he actually said, oh, we got a big strength and conditioning, this was before lockdown, big strength and conditioning session, and he called it something. And I went, oh, God, that's a bit of a beast in. Oh, no, I love it. He said, I love it. I said, right, so that finishes at 2:00 today. What's your next highlight, or what's your next big weights in the morning at 8:00? And I'm going, so no, it is, they live by that schedule, Carl, don't they? And I appreciate it. Absolutely, that's what's needed. But they lack that what can I do in my downtime? Rather than just go into the Costa Club. And this is why I think the players currently, I'm speaking to students, they miss the sport, absolutely, that's their life. But they miss that, hour in Costa, or the hour walking down the beach or whatever it is, with their mates. But it is like, well, what are the skills that they can, and there must be a core of skills in those lists that you've got that maybe just individually maybe, but there must be common skills that players lack in readiness for exiting rugby.
anyone
I think Alan, just picking up on your point, and I've been guilty of this as a player. It's a herd mentality. So if everybody's going to the coffee shop, it takes a strong personality to say, no, I'm going to the library, I'm going to study, or I'm going to go down and work for juicing, or I'm going to. And I think, I look at players and we talk about trying to conform them to the norm in the rugby environment. I think until we break that cycle of the coffee shop mentality, you'll always get people want to be part of the group. Until the norm becomes going out and getting some education or getting some work experience. If that becomes the norm, then people will align themselves to that.
I think you're right there. I think the key to it all, and I don't think it's necessarily lacking of the skills as such. I think it's probably lacking of a secondary passion. Like, we could probably do more as coaches to help with that and try and find something else that these players are passionate about, and try and facilitate learning in that area as well. And maybe something we could look at integrated into our development plans, and doing a bit more about that. Because I think if a player had the passion to learn knowledge in another field, I think that would probably, and be passionate about that, I think that would probably be quite powerful and allow them to use all the skills listed in here. I don't think it's necessarily a lack of specific skills, perhaps.
Louie, that's a really interesting one.
I think you're all right, and that's remember me my example when I joined WASP, because after 20 years or 17 years playing in Biarritz, I discovered another culture of sport. I discovered another country, which is WASP, and I was amazed at the way things was being told or learned. And I remember Sean Edwards, who was one of my coaches, telling us that after the session we were training hard every day, and his talk after the session was, go away from the session, enjoy life, and go away, do something different. And I was really amazed on that kind of speech, because I used to be very, very focused in only rugby. I was curious, but I was really focused in rugby. And the fact that my coach is telling me that you need to go away from the rugby to learn and discover, I think that's also something empowering as an athlete to just realize that it's not just about rugby, it's about something else here. Then I think it's also part of the management and coaches to be very, very positive on that.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely, Serge. And I was only going to say that on one of the very first conversations we had on this, which actually, funnily enough, I picked out in a 2-minute advert yesterday, Jonathan Davis and Stimo were talking about passion outside of rugby, because that's all players know today is rugby, rugby, rugby was the phrase. And if we, like you said, Louie, is if we can help them, and that's where World After Sport can come in and work with the clubs as well, is if we can help players identify what their interests are outside of the day-to-day sport that they contribute within, then absolutely, we think that would develop the player as a person, but also develop them on the pitch as well as off. Because again, part of that mental health that Hoggy was talking about earlier is that they worry, certainly towards the end of their career and towards the end of contracts, is they worry that, well, what if? Where do I go next? What happens if? Am I good enough? And that's again where transferable skills is, hopefully there to help the athlete know that, yeah, you've absolutely got skills here that we can eke out. And the more we can work on placement within organisations, the stronger players will become, because they'll feel that actually more of their life is in control. They know that they can fall back on something else tomorrow.
Yeah, I think if you've got the passion to do something else, you're going to go out and sort after that knowledge. And once you've got knowledge, then you're in a pretty good place to execute all these skills on this list. It's like leadership. You can only lead if you've got clarity, and if you haven't got clarity, you're not going to be a particularly good leader. You need to be able to be very clear and knowledgeable in your field to execute a lot of these skills. I think if you've got passion, you'll go after looking for that knowledge.
And I've just flicked the screen just to reinforce that. So that this is where I was going to sort of finish from my side, is I've picked out the 2 words here, leader and manager. The reason I picked out those 2 is because something that I always wanted to be when I was a young amateur in the banking world, and also I wanted to do it when I was playing sport and wondering what my next career would be. I want to manage. I want to be a manager, because at that time I thought manager was the be all and end all. But actually, as I grew up, as I got experience, I realized that I'm not a manager and I don't want to be a manager. I want to be a leader. And I'm not saying players have both of these skills, or coaches have both of these skills. Some will, but some people are just managers or managers, which is a very, very different skill set to a leader, and a very different set of behaviors to a leader. And again, what I would, and I'm keen to do, is help people understand that difference. So on here, they are just words. But again, part of the plan of the development plan is to help people understand the difference with some of these things. And absolutely. So probably unfair of me to say this in certain ways, but 2 of my heroes in sport, Martin Johnson and Stuart Pearce, everyone said, wow, leaders on a pitch, incredible skills, incredible abilities. And they led the teams and they led them. And they absolutely did. But as soon as they finished their career in playing sport and became the manager of, then their skill sets that were on the pitch, didn't seem to work out quite so well off the pitch, because they were putting the same skill sets and approaching things in the same way that they used to do on the pitch off it. And it doesn't always work like that. And certainly today, I think we all accept and know that the way we deal with players and with people on a day-to-day basis has massively shifted from back in the day. So another of my heroes from the past, Brian Clough, had his skills and had his styles, but everyone said, what a man manager. never said really what a leader he was. He was a man manager, and that's the skill set he had. And he worked in that way. He managed people, he managed situations, he managed the way things were. He wasn't really the leader of the group. And for me, again, it just helps understand that there are differences. I'm not saying every player has the ability to lead or to manage. They probably have a bit of both sometimes. But again, the effort is to work on those skills and support those skills. And Louie, I say you picked out the word leader a few times there. And for me, leaders are the thing of today more than man managers. We still need to manage things, but I think we have to lead people far more than we do, certainly in sport, than we used to. And certainly in my corporate experiences, although my title is often project manager, program manager, etc., I don't manage, I lead. And I try and lead my teams to where we need to get to, and get them to follow my recommendations, my ideas, my styles, rather than dictating. So for me, I'm just looking at time, we're at 11:08. Has anyone got any thoughts on those two words or on the comments I've just made? Because again, I feel that these are things that need to be eked out with a person over time. They're not, you learn a lot. You can learn about leadership. You can learn a lot about leadership. We can certainly help with that. But, you also take a lot of personal capabilities, attributes, and day-to-day skills into whatever you go into. Any views?
I think there's a huge amount of transfer between those two words. Obviously, I mean, if you've got a certain leadership style, that is going to affect your management style. Yep. For me, from a rugby context, I always work with like 4 different types of leaders. This is my own personal philosophy, really. But on the field, you'd have potentially like a motivator, like a warrior or an example setter, a carer. And I think some of those leadership styles don't necessarily transfer into management. You don't necessarily have to manage people when you lead in those ways. You've got great leaders in the game of rugby that lead by example and put their bodies on the line, and they don't necessarily manage people, but they certainly are fantastic leaders in their own style. But there is a huge some of the best leaders in rugby as well. I mean, that would be fantastic managers in any field, I think, because they're so good at managing people, managing relationships, dealing with conflict, managing expectation, etc., etc. But I think there's lots of different leadership styles in sport which don't necessarily require you to manage people. That'd be my philosophy, really.
I'd agree with that, Louis. Yeah, and it's the same in corporate world. Is there are people who can and there are people who can't. There's times you need to lead and there's times when you don't. And the people around you can lead themselves, and that goes again to leadership is sometimes about not saying anything rather than saying a lot. So, guys, that was the end of the presentation from my perspective. Has anyone got any other thoughts on transferable skills? Because I think the key is experience, the key is placement. And the key, the other one is the interest outside of. So as we were touching on, if we can help players find opportunities outside of sport, then it's only going to help them as a person, as performance-wise on the pitch, off the pitch, etc. And the more we can do that, the more we can identify that in personal development plans, then the better. And I think the key, I think, Alan, you hit the nail on the head with the organisation is we need to give the players a little bit of opportunity to learn from mistakes. I think that's what Louis was saying earlier, is sometimes, let them go and do things or try things. If they make a mistake, what do they learn from it? What they're going to do differently next time? What they're going to avoid? What they're going to also do the same? Is, that's what we do with experience. Any comments?
I just agree with you, Martin, in creating that experience. And it might be a situation where you're going into an environment where you think you might want to have an interest in X, and actually it pushes you down a different avenue. But over a 10-year career as a player, then when you're 30, 31, you've got a pretty clear idea what your passion is, and you've got experience in it. rather than, say, trying to find that pathway at 31, 32 when you retire.
Yeah, agree. Anyone else?
I totally agree with Carl as well, and it's this is why I think my work is about you maximize your time now, for your long-term career. Yes, it's all about performance while you're a rugby player, and that's what we're all passionate about. And go back to what Louie said, it's really working with those individuals to find out what their passion is, and and that's why I've had some great experiences, and there'll be a player shortly who I've worked with for 2 years, and his own region didn't know that he had a first-class honours in marketing and business. Yeah, and yet he's now working with, I won't say who it is, and I won't say what the big company is. He's been developing his own product, and the passion that he's shown, and you can see where it comes from in his rugby on the pitch. He's a character. He's got a brand. But people just see him as that person, that rugby person. But in the background, and he's taken time. He's gone up to speak with Louis Vuitton, and he's been out to all the big companies, and then all of a sudden, it would have been launched. And he knows that probably if I launch it now, it'll take him into his post-career and hopefully take off again. But it's finding out what the passion is. And that passion could be anything, couldn't it? No, it's and I know that there are organisations out there who've been drumming, beating the drum, and even the players' associations and stuff like that. But I think and Carl had said this, and I think Jonathan Davis said it before. It's like until an actual organisation makes it part of their culture of learning, then I'm not saying it like this. It's like Louis will know this. Hong Kong had a little bit of a different sort of strategy. It was called something like learn while you earn. So basically, they went professional in the 7s and then 15s, but part of the agreement was they continued either to work, with industry. Some of the top players were still in sort of finance, accounts, banking, etc., because 2-year contracts could change like that. And in 2 years' time, they'd have to go back into that industry or a new industry. So it's not rocket science, but it just needs, probably, as you say, that governance from that leadership from somebody in an organization, whether it's the director of rugby or CEO or whatever. Because yes, it is about performing on the field. It's about, all the emphasis and efforts going into being, the top club in Premiership and the top club in Pro 14 and out in sort of France and whatever. We know that, but I think there's so much talk now about, have we created this monster over the years, this one-dimensional athlete? But now is it time, like Carl said, there's so much synergy with the military when they come out of the forces, and it's like a lost soul. We know the transitional theory, belonging, identity, that's been there for the last 20 years. But it just needs one organization. And I've said this, you'll get one organization, and then you'll have the herd culture, everybody going, wow, why are they performing so well on the pitch, but also happy off it? They're doing something different to us, and they start following. They'll start, copying. So I think it's exciting times. I know some great people sort of sharing those ideas. But as I said, it's not rocket science. But I'm sure that we know the world's going to change, aren't we? It's changing as it is. So that's the biggest transition for us all, I think.
Absolutely, Alan. And I think, the challenge for clubs, of course, is the time and effort it takes to help those players with those plans. So hence, I'm hoping that with World After Sport, what we can do is obviously work with the clubs to take some of that burden away, so that we have got that synergy of the desire of the player. Like I said, the personal development plan should be one, not one with the club and one with us. Is you bring those together. We can then talk with the player individually and with the club and say, look, we're great news. We've got a placement here for X person on a weekly basis. They're going to spend this much time because that's what we've agreed with the club is, that every, twice a week, half a day a week on each of those occasions, they can spend their time with that sponsor or with that club, with that company. It's going to build their knowledge, build their exposure. Of course, it needs to be adaptable and flexible in case of change due to playing demand or, you know, European fixtures, etc. But the idea is that, again, the burden shouldn't be with the club only, because otherwise that's going to cause more financial challenge from an individual basis. You're going to have teams of people finding these opportunities. So what I'm keen to do is obviously take that burden away from clubs as much as I can, to help them and hopefully help the performance on the pitch as much as off it.
I don't think we can ignore the coaches as well, can we?
I always say athletes. I mean coaches when I say it, Alan. You're absolutely right. You always correct me on it, and you're damn right to correct me on it. I mean it. You know, anyone in professional sport really is. If you're an athlete or a coach, you're in exactly the same position. In fact, coach is probably in a more vulnerable position in many respects, because players aren't you're not asked to leave the club in the middle of a season, whereas a coach can have that risk and concern every day of the week. So yeah, couldn't agree more. And forgive me, I'm conscious I sometimes say athletes and coaches. Every time I say it, I mean both. Absolutely. Guys, is there anyone else who's got anything to say before I wrap up with a final?
Yeah, I was just really interesting of all the feedback and everything I heard today. And I always have the feeling that I think we've got 3-4 generation of players here with coaches, players, coaches, manager. And I always feel like when I retired 10 years ago, I didn't really see where I wanted to put my feet, really. And I wanted to be a manager, I wanted to be a coach. And today I realized that, like Martin said, I'm a kind of leader, and I want to share that lead, because I definitely believe that rugby is one of the best sports ever, and we are able to maintain that kind of difference between other sports. And I think we can create something really massive in terms of impact. And yeah, I always want to be coach, and I know that the coach is short term. I always want to be manager, and I know all this stuff, but yeah, I think we can create something really, really powerful around this topic, and I'm really excited.
Thank you, Serge. So guys, Serge, I'm not going to include you in this next round because you've just said what I want you to say, really, and I'll send you the money later. But what I do is go around the room very quickly, just feedback on what's the one thing you've got out of today, if anything. If you haven't, I'm not going to lose sleep. But it'd be nice to know if you've got anything out of today, so that obviously I can post a little bit of an image of the positives of conversation. So if I go around the room, just 10-20 seconds of what you've found, what you've learned, if anything, or what you think is most important going forward. So Alan, as you're off mute, I'm going to come to you first, if I may.
Apology if I was off mute. I didn't say anything, honestly. No, I think it's a small group today, but it's so vital. I think that getting this message across, there are people there to help, and you know, I think it is about becoming, especially with Carl and Louie and, you know, other coaches at the moment, it's becoming more transformational rather than transactional, isn't it? You know, it's getting across that sort of, let's do things differently for the benefit of that individual's performance. And I think the transferable skills are definitely the only way you're going to find out is by, you know, taking yourself out of the comfort zone of rugby and putting yourself into a different environment to learn those new skills, but also to identify, oh my gosh, I do have those skills. So I think it's going to be beneficial for everybody if they take that sort of personal organisation and do it themselves as well.
Cheers, Alan. Louie, you're off mute as well, so I'm going to come to you.
Yeah, just the biggest takeaway for me really is going back to Alan's question earlier. I think is about what skills are these players lacking. It's really got me thinking and prompted me to think about that a bit more deeply. being a bit more situational, perhaps in my day-to-day job at the moment, and working with the individuals a bit more specifically on what their passions are and things like that. And yeah, it's been a valuable chat today. Really got me thinking.
Thank you, Louie. No, it's good to have you on, and hopefully you can join us again soon. Hoggy.
Yeah, I think as a sport in rugby, we recognise the transferable skills we have. We've discussed them this morning, but it's creating a vehicle to explore them in different avenues, whether it's a corporate or business world. And that's where I think World After Sport can be that vehicle. And it's, if we can get that right, players can take these skills, values into the business and corporate world.
Cheers, Hoggy. Charlie.
I think very similar to what Hoggy just said. I think I probably, as a current player, I know of certain skills I've learned in rugby without realising I've learned them, and that they can be used in other walks. But it's actually, if you'd sat me down and said, okay, give me an example of when you've used them and how you think you could use them in my business, probably before this call, I'd never really thought of that. So it's actually thinking about how I transfer these transferable skills I've got and how I can tell future employers or business partners or whatever I end up going into eventually, okay, this is what I've learned from being a professional rugby player, and this is how I can use that to help your business, my business, our business together. So I think that's what this course really got me thinking about, is being able to express to other people and business partners, etc., how the skills I've got, how they can be valuable to those people, and how I can use them to help them.
Brilliant. Guys, I can't thank you enough for giving me all your time. Really appreciate it. I'm hoping you can join me again on Wednesday. If you can't, that would be a shame, but if you can encourage a few of the other guys to come back and join us, that would be great. Let's get a few more on the call. I know there's one or two others that are joining, so that would be grand. But if you can get anyone else, fantastic. But thank you all for your time. Really, really valued. And have a great week. The sun's out at the moment. Obviously, I can look behind Hoggy and see there's plenty of sun down there. So look at you.
I was just going to say, can we all move to Hoggy's place?
Get the barbecue on, Hoggy, would you? Just put 2 meters apart, but we'll all have a beer and we'll all have a burger. All right then, guys. Well, thank you ever so much again. Have a fantastic week, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Cheers, Jen.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers, guys.